The metal corridors of Nexus Prime stretched out like the veins of some giant creature. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison walked through them with steady steps, his boots making soft sounds on the polished floor. Behind him, 3 other humans followed, their faces showing the mix of wonder and nervousness that came with being so far from home. Lisa Harper pressed her nose against one of the massive windows that lined the corridor. Outside, ships of every shape and size moved through space like colorful fish in a vast ocean. Some looked like smooth stones. Others had sharp edges that could cut through starlight. A few were so strange that her human brain struggled to understand what she was seeing. "Look at that one," she whispered to Amy Foster, pointing at a ship that seemed to be made of living coral. "It's actually growing as we watch." Amy nodded, her tablet ready to record everything. As the team's cultural expert, she had studied dozens of alien species before coming to Nexus Prime. But studying pictures and videos was nothing like seeing the real thing. The station was home to over 40 different species, each with their own customs, languages, and ways of thinking. Ryan Blake walked with his hand near his sidearm, though he knew he would never be allowed to use it. The security officer had read every report about Nexus Prime, memorized every floor plan, and studied every potential threat. But all his training felt small compared to the reality of being surrounded by creatures that could kill him in ways he had never imagined. "Stay close," Jake said quietly. "We're guests here, but that doesn't mean everyone is happy to see us." The human delegation had been invited to Nexus Prime for what the Galactic Council called routine trade discussions. Jake knew better. Nothing about humanity's place in the galaxy was routine. 15 years ago, humans had been alone in the universe, or so they thought. Then the Zephyrian scout ships had found Earth, and everything changed. First contact had been peaceful, mostly because humans had nothing the aliens wanted. Earth was just another world with basic metals and simple life forms. The Zephyrians had been curious about human art and music, but not much else. They had shared basic space travel technology and invited Earth to join the galactic community as a junior member. Now, humans were trying to prove they belonged among the stars. Jake's mission was simple in theory: negotiate trade agreements. That would help Earth get the resources it needed to build more ships and stations. In practice, it was like trying to make friends at a party where everyone was bigger, stronger, and smarter than you. The corridor opened into the central plaza, and Jake stopped walking. The space was enormous, with a ceiling so high it disappeared into shadows. Shops and restaurants lined the walls in spiraling patterns that followed no human logic. Aliens of every description moved through the space, their voices creating a sound like wind through a forest of metal trees. "Remember the briefing," Jake said to his team. "We observe, we learn, and we don't cause trouble. Earth is counting on us to make a good impression." Lisa's eyes were wide as she watched a group of Korthik merchants arranging their goods. The reptilian beings were nearly 8 feet tall, with scales that shifted color depending on their mood. Right now, they were a deep green, which Amy's research said meant they were focused on business. "They're actually beautiful," Lisa said. "I mean, in a scary way. Beautiful and dangerous," Ryan added. "The Korthik Empire controls 3 solar systems and has never lost a war." Amy checked her tablet. "They value strength and directness. Showing weakness or uncertainty is considered an insult." Jake nodded. He had read the same reports. The Korthik saw humans as soft creatures who had stumbled into space, traveled through luck rather than skill. They weren't hostile exactly, but they made no effort to hide their contempt. On the other side of the plaza, a group of Zephyrians moved through the crowd like dancers. Their insect-like bodies were covered in chitin that gleamed like polished metal, and their compound eyes saw everything. They controlled most of the trade routes in this part of the galaxy, and their approval could make or break Earth's economic future. There, Jake pointed to a section of the plaza where tables and chairs had been set up. That's where the preliminary meetings will happen. Informal discussions before the real negotiations start. The team moved through the crowd, drawing stares from every direction. Humans were still rare enough to be curiosities. Some aliens seemed friendly, offering what might have been smiles on their strange faces. Others watched with expressions. That could have been hunger or amusement. A small blue creature with too many eyes scurried between Lisa's legs, chirping something that sounded like laughter. She jumped back, bumping into a tall being that looked like a walking tree. The creature made a sound like wind through leaves, which Amy's tablet translated as, "No harm, small one." "Sorry," Lisa said, though she doubted the creature understood. "English. They have translation devices," Amy explained. "Most of the major species do. But the translations aren't always perfect, and some concepts don't translate at all." They found their assigned meeting area, a cluster of tables near a fountain. That sprayed liquid light instead of water. Jake set down his briefcase and looked around. The preliminary discussions would start soon, and he wanted to make sure his team was ready. "Lisa, you'll handle technical specifications for any equipment we might need. Amy, cultural consultation. And protocol. Ryan, you're our observer. Watch for anything that might indicate trouble." "What about you?" Lisa asked. "I'll try to convince them that humans are worth doing business with." A shadow fell across their table. Jake looked up to see a Korthik approaching, his scales shifting from green to orange, which meant he was curious or amused. The alien was massive, with arms that could probably crush a human skull without effort. "You are the new species, the—" Korthik said, his voice like stones grinding together. "The ones who call themselves human." "That's right," Jake said, standing up. He was tall for a human, but the Korthik still towered over him. "I'm Jake Morrison, representing Earth." The alien scales shifted to a darker orange. "I am Vexther, commander of the Korthik trade fleet. I have heard interesting things about your species. Good things, I hope." Vexthera's laugh sounded like breaking glass. "That remains to be seen. Your people are said to be weak, but clever. Is this true?" Jake felt his team tense behind him. This was exactly the kind of test he had expected. "We prefer to let our actions speak for themselves." Wise words. But words are wind, and wind does not move mountains. The Korthik commander walked away, leaving Jake with the feeling that he had just been measured and found wanting. Around the plaza, other aliens had been watching the exchange. Some seemed amused, others bored. "Well," Amy said quietly, "that was subtle." "He's testing us," Jake replied. "They all are. Every species here is trying to figure out where humans fit in the galactic order." Lisa stood up and brushed off her uniform. "Then let's show them. I'm hungry, and I want to try some of that alien food. Amy, you said the Korthik respect directness, right?" "Lisa, I don't think that's a good idea," Ryan said, but Lisa was already walking toward the food vendors, her curiosity stronger than her caution. Jake watched her go, torn between admiration for her courage and worry about what might happen next. In his experience, first contact situations had a way of going wrong at the worst possible moments. The plaza hummed with alien voices and the sound of 1,000 different kinds of business being conducted. Jake Morrison stood among beings from across the galaxy, representing a species that was still learning its place among the stars. He had no way of knowing that in a few minutes, everything would change. Lisa Harper walked toward the food vendors with the kind of curiosity that had gotten humans into trouble since the beginning of time. The smells coming from the various stalls were strange but not unpleasant. Some reminded her of spices from Earth, while others were completely foreign to her nose. The Korthik food vendor was the largest stall in the area. Steam rose from metal containers that bubbled and hissed with unknown contents. The vendor himself was a massive reptilian being, with scales that shifted between deep red and orange. His name tag read Grickstar in both alien script and basic galactic common. "Excuse me," Lisa said, approaching the counter with a friendly smile. "Could you tell me what these dishes are?" Grickstar looked down at her with eyes that were like yellow glass. His scales darkened slightly, shifting toward a brown color that Amy's briefing had said meant confusion or irritation. "You are the new species," he said, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "The weak ones from the small world." Lisa kept her smile, though it felt less natural now. "We're humans, yes. I'm just curious about your food. It smells wonderful." The Korthik's head tilted to one side, a gesture that looked predatory on his reptilian features. "You mock the traditional foods of my people with your strange facial expressions." "Mock?" Lisa's smile faded. "No, I'm not mocking anything. I'm genuinely interested. On Earth, we believe that sharing food is a way to build friendship between different peoples." Grickstar's scales shifted to a deeper brown, almost black at the edges. Other Korthik in the area began to take notice. Lisa could see them moving closer, their own scales changing colors in what looked like a pattern of communication. "You speak of friendship while showing your teeth," Grickstar said, his voice getting louder. "This is how predators threaten their prey before attacking." Lisa touched her face, confused. She had been smiling, which to humans was a sign of friendliness. But she realized now that to a species that didn't smile, showing teeth might look like aggression. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to offend you. On my world, we show happiness by what you call showing teeth. It's not a threat." "But—" Her explanation only seemed to make things worse. More Korthik had gathered around the stall now, their scales rippling through shades of brown and orange. Their movements were slow but purposeful, like hunters surrounding their prey. "Now you lie," Grickstar said, leaning over the counter. His breath smelled like sulfur and hot metal. "You claim your threatening gesture is happiness, as if we are fools who cannot recognize danger." Across the plaza, Jake Morrison was examining a display of alien artifacts when he heard the change in the crowd's noise. The normal buzz of conversation had shifted to something more focused, more intense. He looked up and saw a group of Korthik gathering around one of the food stalls. "Ryan," he said quietly to his security officer. "Something's happening." Ryan Blake had already noticed. His training made him sensitive to changes in crowd behavior, and what he was seeing made his hand move instinctively toward his weapon. "It's Lisa. She's in the middle of it." Amy Foster looked up from her tablet, where she had been recording notes about alien business practices. "What's she doing?" "Being curious," Jake said grimly. "Just like I was afraid she would." The three men started moving toward the food stalls, but they were on the far side of the plaza. The crowd of aliens between them and Lisa was thick, and many of them were larger than humans. Jake could see Lisa's blonde hair in the center of the Korthik group, but he couldn't see her face dot at the food stall. Lisa was trying to back away, but the Korthik had formed a loose circle around her. She wasn't trapped, exactly, but leaving would mean pushing past aliens who were clearly agitated. "I should go," she said, her voice smaller than before. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "Now you show wisdom," Grickstar said. "But wisdom comes too late. You have insulted the honor of my clan and the traditions of my people." "I really didn't mean to," Lisa said. "Please, let me apologize properly. How do your people express regret?" But Grickstar wasn't interested in apologies. His scales had turned almost completely black, and the other Korthik were making low rumbling sounds deep in their throats. Lisa realized that her attempts to fix the situation were only making it worse. Your kind thinks you can charm your way out of any situation, Grickstar said. You believe that words can replace honor and strength. This is why your species will never be more than servants to your betters. Lisa felt her own temper starting to rise. She had come here with nothing but friendly curiosity, and now she was being insulted and threatened. We're not servants to anyone, she said, her voice getting stronger. And we're not weak just because we prefer talking to fighting. They. Korthik Vender's eyes narrowed. You dare speak of strength to me? You, who come from a world so soft that your people know nothing of real conflict. You don't know anything about my world, Lisa said, or about my people. Around the plaza, other aliens had started to notice the confrontation. Some moved closer, to watch, while others backed away. The tension was thick enough to taste. Like the air before a thunderstorm. Jake Morrison was pushing through the crowd now, not caring if he bumped into aliens or stepped on strange feet. He could see Lisa facing off against the huge Korthik, and he knew the situation was about to explode. Your people are children playing with toys they do not understand, Grickstar continued. You have no place among the strong races of the galaxy. You should return to your little world and leave space to those who belong here. That was too much for Lisa. Her face flushed red, and she stepped forward instead of back. We have every right to be here. We earned our place through our own efforts, not by conquering others or threatening the weak. The words hit Grickstar like a physical blow. His scales flashed to pure black, and the other Korthik stopped their rumbling. The silence that followed was deadly. You call us weak? Grickstar's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried clearly through the sudden. Quiet. You accuse the Korthik Empire of preying on the defenseless? Lisa realized she had gone too far, but it was too late to take the words back. I didn't mean ... Silence. Grickstar roared, his voice echoing off the plaza's walls. You have insulted my honor, my clan, and my empire. There is only one response to such words. His clawed hand moved faster than Lisa could react. The blow caught her across the left side of her face, sending her stumbling backward. The sound of claw on flesh was sharp and wet, and blood immediately began to flow from 3 parallel cuts on her cheek. Lisa hit the ground hard, her hand flying to her injured face. The taste of copper filled her mouth, and she could feel the warm wetness of blood between her fingers. Around her, the crowd of aliens fell completely silent. Grickstar stood over her, his claws still extended and dripping red. Let this be a lesson to your kind, he said. Respect is earned through strength, not words. The other Korthik rumbled their approval. Some of the watching aliens seemed satisfied, as if justice had been served. Others looked uncomfortable but unwilling to interfere in what was clearly Korthik business. Lisa struggled to sit up, her head spinning from the blow. She could see Jake Morrison pushing through the crowd toward her, his face pale with shock and something else. Something that made her think of storms and earthquakes and other forces of nature that could not be reasoned with. Grickstar turned away from her, dismissing her as if she were no longer worth his attention. He began cleaning his claws on a piece of cloth, taking his time with each talon. The silence stretched out for 3 heartbeats. Then Jake Morrison reached the edge of the circle, and everything changed. Jake Morrison saw the blood on Lisa's face, and something inside him went very quiet and very cold. The noise of the plaza, the chatter of aliens, the hum of machinery, all of it faded away until there was only the sight of his teammate on the ground and the Korthik standing over her. 1 second. Jake's mind cataloged everything in the space around him. Grickstar was turned away, cleaning his claws. The other Korthik were relaxed, satisfied with their leader's display of dominance. The watching aliens expected the humans to call for help, or back down like every other species did when faced with Korthik aggression. 2 seconds. Jake moved through the crowd like water flowing around stones. His steps were silent, his breathing controlled. The years of training kicked in, not just military training, but something deeper, something that went back to humanity's earliest days, when survival meant protecting the tribe at any cost. 3 seconds. Jake reached Grixtar just as the Korthik was turning back toward Lisa with a satisfied expression. The alien's yellow eyes went wide as he saw the human approaching, but he had no time to react. Jake's first strike hit Grixtar in the solar plexus, right where Amy's briefings had said Korthik kept their breathing organs. The alien doubled over, gasping for air. Jake's second strike was an uppercut that caught the Korthik under the chin, snapping his head back. The third was a sweep that took Grixtar's legs out from under him. The massive alien hit the ground like a falling tree. His scales flickered rapidly through several colors before settling on a pale gray that Amy would have recognized as the Korthik equivalent of being unconscious. The entire sequence took exactly 3 seconds. Jake stood over the fallen Korthik, his hands loose at his sides, his breathing steady. His face was calm, but his eyes held something that made every alien in the plaza take a step backward. The silence was complete. Even the background noise of the station seemed to pause, as if the machinery itself was holding its breath. The other Korthik began to move. There were 6 of them, all nearly as large as Grixtar, all with scales that had shifted to the deep red that meant battle rage. They spread out in a half-circle around Jake, their claws extended, their reptilian faces showing expressions of disbelief and fury. "You dare attack a Korthik warrior?" one of them hissed. "You will die for this insult, Softskin." Jake didn't move from his position over Grixtar. "The female is under our protection," he said in a voice that carried clearly across the silent plaza. "Anyone who harms her will face the same consequence." Ryan Blake and Amy Foster reached the edge of the circle at the same time. Ryan's hand was on his weapon, though he knew it would be useless against so many opponents. Amy had her tablet out, frantically searching for information about Korthik combat rituals. "Jake," Ryan called softly, "we need to get Lisa and get out of here." Lisa was trying to stand, one hand still pressed to her bleeding cheek. The cuts weren't deep, but they were painful, and the blood made them look worse than they were. She looked up at Jake with a mixture of gratitude and worry. "I'm okay," she said, though her voice shook slightly. "We should go." But the Korthik weren't going to let them leave. More of them were arriving from other parts of the plaza, drawn by the smell of conflict. Soon there were a dozen of the reptilian warriors surrounding the small group of humans. Crowd of watching aliens grew larger as well. Word was spreading through the station that something unprecedented was happening. Humans, the weak, soft species from the Rim world, had struck down a Korthik warrior. A new voice cut through the tension. "Stand aside." The crowd parted to let through a Korthik who was even larger than the others. His scales were a deep, rich gold that spoke of high-ranked and many battles. Scars crisscrossed his hide, and his eyes held the kind of intelligence that made him more dangerous than any of the others. Amy's tablet identified him immediately. "That's Vexther," she whispered. "The one who spoke to you earlier. He's a fleet commander." Vexther looked down at the unconscious Grixtar, then at Jake, then at Lisa's bloodied face. His expression was unreadable. "Explain," he said simply. Didn't take his eyes off the surrounding Korthik. "Your warrior struck an unarmed female who was trying to apologize for a cultural misunderstanding. I responded appropriately." "Appropriately?" Vexther's scales shifted to a darker gold. "You believe it appropriate to attack a Korthik over words?" "She wasn't speaking words when he hit her," Jake said. "She was bleeding." The simple statement carried a weight that made several of the watching aliens shuffle nervously. There was something in the human's tone that suggested this wasn't just about one incident. but about something much deeper. Vexther studied Jake for a long moment. "You are not what we expected from your species," he admitted. "We were told humans were weak, that you avoided conflict." "We prefer to avoid unnecessary conflict," Jake corrected. "But some things are necessary, such as protecting our own." The golden-scaled Korthik made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your own? You barely know this female. She is not your mate, not your offspring. Why risk your life for her?" Jake's answer was immediate and certain. "Because she's human." The simplicity of the statement seemed to confuse many of the aliens. Among most galactic species, loyalty was based on family groups, profit, or dominance hierarchies. The idea of risking everything for someone simply because they belonged to the same species was foreign to them. "Interesting," Vexter said, "but words are still words. You have struck down a Korthik warrior. Honor demands a response." "Then respond," Jake said quietly. The challenge hung in the air like smoke. Around the plaza, aliens were backing away, giving the combatants more room. Some were making what looked like bets, though most seemed to think the outcome was obvious. Vexter was a head taller than Jake, and probably weighed twice as much. His arms were thick with muscle, and his claws could open a human throat with a single swipe. He had fought in dozens of battles across 3 star systems and had never been defeated in single combat. But as he looked at the human, standing protectively over his teammate, something made him hesitate. There was no fear in Jake's eyes, no uncertainty. Just a calm readiness that spoke of absolute commitment. "You would fight me?" Vexter asked. "You know you cannot win." "I know I won't quit," Jake replied. The distinction was important, and Vexter was smart enough to understand it. This wasn't about winning or losing. It was about something the Korthik had always respected, but rarely seen in other species: the willingness to face impossible odds for the sake of honor. "You interest me, human," Vexter said. "Very well. We will settle this in the traditional way." He began to circle Jake, his movements fluid despite his size. The other Korthik pulled back to form a wider circle, giving their commander room to work. The watching aliens pressed closer, not wanting to miss what might be the last moments of the first human to challenge Korthik authority. Lisa tried to stand, but Amy gently held her down. "Don't," Amy whispered. Moving now might distract him. Ryan kept his hand near his weapon, knowing it was useless, but unable to stop himself. He watched Jake begin to match Vexter's circling movement, the 2 fighters sizing each other up. Plaza held its breath as predator faced predator, waiting to see which one would strike first. Vexter moved like liquid metal, his golden scales catching the light as he circled Jake. The Korthik commander had fought hundreds of battles, and his movements showed the confidence of someone who had never lost. His claws gleamed as he flexed. His fingers, each one sharp enough to cut through human flesh like paper. Jake turned to keep the alien in sight, but he didn't mirror the circling pattern. Instead, he stood in one place, rotating just enough to face his opponent. His hands hung loose at his sides, and his breathing was slow and steady. "He's too calm," Ryan whispered to Amy. "He should be more aggressive." Amy was watching the crowd, as much as the fighters. The aliens were fascinated by what they were seeing. Most had never witnessed humans in combat before, and they clearly expected something different from what Jake was showing them. "Maybe that's the point," she whispered back. "We're not like them." Vexter suddenly lunged forward, his claws sweeping toward Jake's chest in an arc that would have opened a human from shoulder to hip. But Jake wasn't there anymore. He had stepped inside the arc of the attack, too close for the claws to reach him, and his elbow drove upward into the soft spot under Vexter's arm. The Korthik grunted in pain and swung his other hand down toward Jake's head. Again, Jake moved just enough to avoid the strike, this time stepping to the side and driving his fist into Vexter's ribs. The alien's scales provided some protection, but the force of the blow still made him stagger. "Impossible," one of the watching Korthik hissed. "No soft skin moves that fast." But Jake wasn't moving particularly fast. He was moving efficiently. Every step was exactly where it needed to be. Every strike hit exactly the right spot. There was no wasted motion, no unnecessary flourishes. It was like watching a machine designed for one purpose: winning fights. Vexter recovered quickly and pressed his attack. His claws flashed through the air in complex patterns, but Jake seemed to flow around them like water. When he couldn't avoid a strike completely, he redirected it, using the alien's own momentum against him. "This is not how combat works," a blue-skinned alien said to his companion. "Where is the roaring? Where is the display of strength?" Amy overheard and found herself speaking without thinking. "Humans don't fight to show off," she said. "We fight to survive." The alien turned to look at her with multiple eyes. "Explain." Amy realized she had an audience now. Several aliens had gathered around her, drawn by curiosity about human behavior. She looked at her tablet, then back at the fight, where Jake had just avoided another set of claws and responded with a knee strike. That made Vexter grunt in pain. "My species evolved on a world that was trying to kill us," Amy began. "We weren't the biggest or strongest creatures on our planet. We weren't the fastest or the most poisonous. We survived because we learned to be smart about fighting." On the other side of the circle, Ryan found himself surrounded by different aliens asking similar questions. "Your warrior shows no anger," a tall, thin being said in a voice like breaking glass. "How can he fight without rage?" "Anger makes you stupid," Ryan replied, remembering his training. "Jake isn't angry. He's focused." In the center of the circle, Vexter was beginning to realize that he was in serious trouble. The human was faster than he looked, stronger than he appeared, and far more skilled than anyone had expected. Every attack the Korthik launched was either avoided or countered, and the small strikes Jake landed in return were adding up. "You fight like a coward," Vexter snarled, trying to goad Jake into making a mistake. "Face me with honor." Jake's response was to step inside another claw swipe and drive his palm into Vexter's solar plexus. The alien doubled over, gasping for air, and Jake's knee came up to meet his descending chin. The sound of the impact echoed across the plaza. Vexter staggered backward, his golden scales now showing flecks of the gray that meant pain and confusion. Blood dripped from his mouth where he had bitten his tongue. "Honor," Jake said quietly, "is protecting people who can't protect themselves. Everything else is just showing off." The watching aliens murmured among themselves. They were seeing something they had never witnessed before. A smaller, weaker fighter systematically dismantling a superior opponent through pure skill and determination. "How is this possible?" A Zephyrian trader asked Amy. "Your species has no natural weapons, no armor, no size advantage. How do you fight so well?" Amy looked at Jake, who had just avoided another desperate attack from Vexter, and responded with a series of quick strikes to pressure points that made the Korthik commander stumble. "Because we had to," she said simply. "On our world, everything was bigger and stronger than us. We learned to hunt animals that could run faster, predators that could bite harder, creatures that could kill us in 100 different ways. We survived by being smarter, more persistent, and more willing to work together than anything else on the planet." A small, furry alien tugged at her sleeve. "Work together? But your warrior fights alone." Amy smiled. "Look around. Do you see Ryan and me running away? Do you see us abandoning Jake and Lisa?" The alien looked and seemed to understand. The humans weren't just individuals fighting separate battles. They were a unit, each one ready to support the others no matter what. happened. In the fighting circle, Vexter was slowing down. His attacks were becoming more desperate and less controlled. Jake had landed dozens of small strikes, and while none of them had been devastating by themselves, together they were wearing the Korthek down. "Your people," Vexter panted between attacks, "are not what we were told." "No," Jake agreed, stepping aside from another claw swipe. "We're not. We were told you were weak, that you avoided conflict, that you had no warrior spirit." Jake caught Vexter's wrist as another claw came toward his face, twisted it, and used the alien's own momentum to send him stumbling across the circle. "We avoid unnecessary conflict," he corrected. "But when someone hurts our people, conflict becomes very necessary." Vexter tried to charge, hoping to use his size and weight to overwhelm the human. Jake sidestepped at the last moment and helped. The alien's momentum carried him past. Vexter crashed into the crowd of watching Korthek, who scattered to avoid their falling commander. When Vexter struggled to his feet, his scales had shifted to a pale gold that meant exhaustion. He was breathing hard, his movements were sluggish, and there was a new respect in his yellow eyes as he looked at Jake. "Enough," he said, raising one clawed hand. "I concede." The plaza erupted in shocked whispers. A Korthek commander had surrendered to a human. It was unprecedented. Jake nodded and immediately turned away from his defeated opponent to check on Lisa. The blood on her face had dried, and the cuts were already beginning to heal, but she was pale and shaken. "Are you all right?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice was still unsteady. "Thank you." Jake helped her to her feet, then looked around at the crowd of aliens. They were staring at the humans with expressions that ranged from amazement to fear to something that might have been respect. "We should go," Ryan said quietly, "before someone decides to test us again." But as they started to leave, Vexter's voice stopped them. "Human," he called. Jake turned back to face the Korthek commander, who was now standing upright despite his exhaustion. "What do you call this fighting style?" Vexter asked. Jake considered the question. "We don't have a special name for it," he said finally. "We just call it protecting our family." The simple answer seemed to hit the watching aliens like a physical blow. Family wasn't just blood relatives to humans. It was anyone they chose to protect. And they would fight impossible odds to keep their family safe. As the human delegation walked away from the plaza, word began to spread throughout Nexus Prime. The weak species from Earth had just proven they were anything but weak, and the galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. Word spread through Nexus Prime faster than a ship traveling through hyperspace. By the time Jake Morrison and his team reached their quarters, every alien on the station had heard some version of what happened in the plaza. The stories grew, with each telling, but the basic facts remained the same. A human had defeated a Korthek commander in single combat. The human delegation sat in their small meeting room, trying to process what had just occurred. Lisa held an ice pack against her cheek, while Amy cleaned the cuts with medical supplies from their emergency kit. Ryan stood by the door, watching the corridor through the security monitor. "We're getting a lot of visitors," Ryan reported. "Aliens." Walking past our quarters, stopping to look at the door, then moving on. Word of mouth travels fast around here. Jake sat at the table, his hands steady as he filled out an incident report on his tablet. He showed no signs of the fight except for slightly reddened knuckles where he had struck Vexter as scales. "How are you feeling?" Amy asked Lisa as she applied a healing patch to the cuts. "Embarrassed mostly," Lisa admitted. "I started all this by not understanding their culture. If I had just walked away when things got tense, then Grickstar would have thought humans were easy targets," Jake said without looking up from his report. "And the next human who came to this station might have faced worse than what you did." Amy nodded in agreement. Sometimes these confrontations are unavoidable. Different species see the same actions in completely different ways. You were being friendly, but to them it looked like aggression. A soft chime indicated someone was requesting entry to their quarters. Ryan checked the security monitor and raised his eyebrows. It's Vexter, and he's alone. Jake looked up from his tablet. Let him in. The Korthik commander had to duck to fit through the doorway designed for smaller species. His golden scales had returned to their normal color, though there were still some darker patches where Jake's strikes had landed. He moved carefully, clearly sore from the fight. I come to speak with you, Vexter said, his voice formal. If you will permit it. Please sit down, Jake said, gesturing to the only chair in the room that might support the alien's weight. Vexter settled into the chair with a slight wince. I have been thinking about our battle, he began, and about what your teammate said regarding your species. Amy leaned forward slightly. What specifically? You said humans evolved by fighting creatures larger and stronger than themselves. That you survived through intelligence and cooperation rather than individual strength. That's right, Amy confirmed. Earth was not an easy world. We had to learn to work together to survive. Vexter was quiet for a moment, his yellow eyes studying each of the humans in turn. The Korthik Empire has conquered 3 star systems, he said finally. We have never been defeated in war. We pride ourselves on individual strength and combat prowess. Your reputation is well known, Jake said carefully. But watching you fight made me realize something, Vexter continued. You were not trying to prove you were stronger than me. You were simply trying to protect your teammate. This is a different kind of strength. Lisa spoke up for the first time since the Korthik had entered. Jake didn't want to fight you. He just wanted to make sure I was safe. Yes, Vexter said, turning his attention to her. And you, female, you did not flee when Grigstar threatened you. Even after he struck you, you did not beg for mercy or offer tribute. Why? Lisa thought about the question. Because running away would have made all humans look weak. And we're not weak. We're just different. Different how? Amy pulled up information on her tablet. Most species develop strength to dominate others or to claim territory. Humans develop strength to protect each other. It's a subtle difference, but it changes everything about how we approach conflict. Vexter nodded slowly. This explains much. When I fought your warrior, he showed no desire to humiliate me or prove his superiority. He simply wanted to win quickly and return to his injured teammate. That's exactly right, Ryan said. Jake wasn't fighting for glory or honor in the way your people understand it. He was fighting to end a threat. The Korthik commander stood up, moving more easily now. I came here to understand what I had witnessed. Now I believe I do. He looked directly at Jake. Your species may be small, but you are not weak. You are dangerous in a way we did not expect. We don't want to be dangerous, Jake said. We want to be left in peace to pursue our own goals. But if someone threatens our people, you become very dangerous indeed, Vexter finished. I will remember this lesson. After the Korthik left, the humans sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Amy spoke up. I think we just changed how at least one alien species sees humanity, she said. Over the next few hours, more visitors arrived. A delegation of Zephyrian traders wanted to discuss new trade agreements with Earth. A group of smaller species that had been bullied by stronger races asked about forming mutual protection pacts. Even some individual Korthik came by to pay their respects to what they now called the warrior who fights for others. But the most important visitor came near the end of the station's day cycle. She was a tall, elegant being with silver skin and large black eyes. Amy's tablet identified her as Coordinator Zerilyn, the highest-ranking official on Nexus Prime. "I represent the Galactic Council," she said in a voice like music. "We have received reports about today's incident and wish to discuss the implications." Jake stood up straighter. "Are we in trouble?" "On the contrary," Zarolin said. "We are impressed. The Council has been observing humanity since your first contact with the Zephyrians. We have been uncertain about your species' place in the galactic community." "And now?" Amy asked. "Now we understand that we were asking the wrong questions. We were measuring you by the standards we use for other species: individual strength, territorial ambitions, resource accumulation. But humans operate on different principles." Lisa looked up from her medical treatment. "What kind of principles?" "Collective protection, mutual support, the willingness to sacrifice for others without expectation of personal gain." Zarolin's black eyes seemed to reflect stars. "These are rare qualities in the galaxy. Most species cooperate only when it benefits them directly. That's just how we are," Jake said. "We take care of our own. But who counts as your own seems to be expanding," Zarolin observed. "Today you fought to protect a teammate, but I suspect you would fight just as hard to protect any human, even a stranger." "Of course," Ryan said, as if the answer was obvious. "And if humans formed alliances with other species, would you extend that protection to them as well?" The question hung in the air. The humans looked at each other, considering the implications. "If they were truly our allies," Jake said carefully, "if they stood with us when we needed help, then yes, we would stand with them too." Zarolin made a sound that might have been satisfaction. "The Council will be very interested to hear this. There are many smaller species in the galaxy who could benefit from human friendship. What does this mean for Earth?" Amy asked. "It means your planet's application for full membership in the Galactic Council will be fast-tracked. It means trade opportunities will open up that were previously closed to you. And it means that other species will think twice before threatening human interests." After Zarolin left, the team sat quietly, processing the day's events. What had started as a simple cultural misunderstanding had become a defining moment for humanity's future among the stars. "So," Lisa said, finally removing the ice pack from her face, "I guess getting smacked by an alien wasn't such a bad thing after all." Jake smiled, the first time he had relaxed since the incident began. "Let's try not to make it a habit." Outside their quarters, Nexus Prime continued its endless business of bringing together species from across the galaxy. But now there was a new understanding spreading through the station's corridors and meeting rooms. Humanity had found its place among the stars, not as conquerors or traders or diplomats, but as protectors, and the galaxy would never be the same.